All right, we are going and moving on to what's called completing the square. And this method for solving quadratics, in all honesty, seems very pointless. And you're not going to see the point of it until probably about pre-calculus or algebra 2, to be honest with you. I would never recommend someone using it to solve an equation, but what it allows us to do, it gets it into the vertex form. So if you remember from 8.4 when we had vertex form, completing the square gets it to that. So you'll see it again in algebra 2 and in pre-calculus, and maybe even calculus, but right now, we're just going to do a very brief introduction. I'm going to do all these notes at once. There's only 4 examples, so it's going to be kind of a longer video, but bear with. All right, so in the warm-up, this is a state question, and you're given this equation, and these are called, if you remember, literal equations. Okay, so these are called literal equations, and you want to solve for r. Now, we haven't done much with radicals yet, and that's something that I would like to get to, but with how this whole quarantine thing is going, I'm not really sure what that is going to entail, but you'll be okay without it, because Miss Holtzberry will take care of you. So you want to solve for r, we're going to have to divide by 4 pi first, okay? And that leaves us with this. So let's talk a little bit about squares, and we've talked about this already. We know the difference between, if you add, what undoes adding is subtracting, and dividing undoes multiplication, and square roots undo something that's squared. And we've already done the square root of x squared is x. Well, to get rid of that square right here, well, I guess we did it in the last unit, my bad. You get this answer. Now, typically, I would be really, really strict about having the plus or minus, but this is not the case. So our answer right here is B. Okay, so let's do this completing the square thing. Okay, so completing the square is weird, okay? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to make it so it's equal to the constant. So you're kind of going to, that's not even true, back up. You're basically setting this equal to 0, and you don't need to do this up again. And I guess I should have put the 0 on the other side so it works for what I want to do. So 1 second. Okay. So set it equal to 0, get rid of that y, and then you would subtract the 7 over. So that's the first step. Now what I'm going to do is going to seem really weird, but just write what I have. Okay, so I'm writing these 2 blank spaces, and I'm writing these 2 blank spaces because they deal with what our next step is. Okay, so you have this down, and the next step says divide b by 2. Well, we have to remember 8 is b. And this is what you're going to do every single time. You're always going to take b divided by 2 and then square it. So I'm going to write this right here. B divided by 2, square it. All right, so 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other. And it says right here, divide by b, square it, and then add this to both sides. So that's what we did. You're then going to factor this, and we're going to factor it slow the first couple ones, and then we're going to go right to what you would do. And you need to find the factors of 16 that give you 4. Well, factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. Well, 4 is going to get you 8. So you're going to left with x plus 4 and x plus 4, and this equals 9. All right, well, what's cool about this is you know that if you multiply the same thing twice, you can really write it this way. And that's the step we're going to skip to eventually. Okay, so then we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we're taking the square root to get rid of that square. Okay, and that leaves you with x plus 4 equals plus or minus 3. That's important right there. Okay, and we need to solve for the x, so we subtract the 4 over, and that leaves you with x equals negative 4 plus or minus 3. Now, without realizing it, that leaves us with 2 answers. Okay, so answer 1 is going to be x equals negative 4 plus 3, and we know that equals negative 1. And then the second answer is when you subtract, you get negative 4 minus 3, which is negative 7. So our 2 answers are negative 7 and negative 1. Okay, so again, this method's really weird, but it's a method that you have to be taught. Okay, so let's do an example. And I know I'm not going to have enough room, so let me get rid of the goals on the bottom of the page. Okay, those are gone. All right, so first step, set it equal to 0 technically. But if you want to, you can subtract the 27 over right away. If you're not ready for it, that's okay. So the first step is to take the constant, remember the steps are right here, the constant over. I'm not going to show you that I'm doing it because we are capable of doing that. Oops. It's all right, we'll just go with it. Okay. And when we did that, we left blank spaces, which I didn't do here, and that's why I said oops. And that's because of what we have to do. So we have x squared minus 12x plus some blank space plus another blank space. So you just need Taylor Swift now playing in the background, and we're good. Okay. So the second step says we're going to take b divided by 2 and square it. And the b in the situation is negative 12, and take that negative with it. If you divide that by 2, you get negative 6, and if you square that, you get 36. Okay? We're going to find the factors of 36 that give us negative 12. And those factors are 1 and 36. I really don't want to go to them. I'm hoping you already got that it's 6 and 6. I don't really want to list them all out because there's a trick to this. I'm going to show it to you in just a second. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 and 6 together get you 12. So you have x minus 6 and x minus 6. And we're going to skip this step here soon. And then 27 and 36, let me just make sure I do this right because I'm not trusting myself right now, is 9. You hear my calculator going. And that's really the same thing as x minus 6 squared equals 9. So let's make a few connections of what we have going on here, okay? First and foremost, this step can be skipped and go right into the x plus 4 squared. So this step can be skipped and go right into the x minus 6 squared. Now, about these numbers, the 4 and the 4 and the 6 and 6, there's actually a really great trick. So when you took 8 divided by 2, did you notice that the answer is 4? Okay. And did you notice that these are also 4 and 4, which is x plus 4 squared? Well, it happens down here too. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, and our factors were negative 6 and negative 6. Because to multiply to a positive, you either get a positive or a negative and negative, and we need a negative and negative because it's negative 12. So my hint to you is anytime you do the dividing by 2 part, that will give you the factors. Okay, so it gives you the factors right there. All right, so then we actually have to solve it. So I'm going to rewrite this up here because I ran out of room. Follow the arrow. To get rid of something squared, you square root it. That gives us x minus 6, and like we said earlier, plus or minus 3. So then, oops, sorry. I always hit this little thing on the side of the pen. Okay, that gives you, you're going to add the 6, so it gives you 6 plus or minus 3. And know the order of how you write this doesn't matter, but I really would prefer if you put the number that you're adding over first, because if not, it just looks kind of goofy, and I think you'd mess up your signs, so I'd rather be careful and not mess those up. All right, so then we get our first answer, and I'm going to get that by taking 6 plus 3, which is 9, and our second answer, which we're going to get by taking 6 minus 3, which is 3. So 2 answers are 3 and 9, okay? All right, we are going to keep on moving along, and like I said, we're just going to do every single example, so it's going to be kind of a longer video. All right, so I'm going to have you try number 2 on your own, and then I'm going to quickly go through it. So remember all the steps, flip back to your notes if you need to. If you get stuck, this is where you restart the video. If you got it, restart the video. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video now. All right, now that you restarted the video, I'm going to go through this. First step is to get the constant over. I'm not going to write plus 0 just to save time, but I am going to write my blank spaces. So we subtracted the 5 over, and I'm going to go. So then you're going to take b divided by 2, which is 4 divided by 2 squared, which is 2 squared, and that equals 4. All right. Now I told you the trick right here. That number, when 4 is divided by 2, that's actually going to be your factors, and you're going to take the signs with it. So since it's positive, I'm going to have x plus 2 and x plus 2, which is really x plus 2 squared. And negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. From there, you square root both sides. Okay? And we're going to run into an issue. So x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Well, you can't in your calculator do plus or minus the square root of negative 1. I think it comes up as your calculator's non-real answer, like this. And that's the case, because in Algebra 2, you're going to learn that square root of negative 1 is I. So if we were in Algebra 2, so you don't have to go past this, I'll explain what you do. Okay, with Algebra 1, our answer is going to be no solution. So our Algebra 1 answer is no solution. And this is where it gets tricky because they kind of divide up what you learn. But in Algebra 2, we would say we had x equals negative 2 plus or minus I. And that would be your answer in Algebra 2. But this is the answer I'm looking for, okay? So let's do the next two problems. So if you got, back up, if you got stuck on this, that's fine. If you got to here, I'm happy. But if you didn't know what to do with the negative 1, that's understandable, okay? This was kind of a mean problem, I won't lie, to have you do on your own, but sometimes we have to think on our own, especially with the situation we're in here. Okay, so 3 and 4 is going to say irrational solutions. So if you remember in the beginning of the year, that means probably you're going to have a radical under some number that doesn't simplify, okay? So first step, I'm going to do 3 with you, 4 on your own, okay? You're going to take the 4 and add it over. So you get x squared, oops, not plus, sorry. X squared minus 2x plus a blank space equals 4 plus a blank space because we added the 4 over, okay? Then you're going to take negative 2 and divide by 2 and square it. Okay, that's the rule we do every time. Remember, b divided by 2 squared. Negative 2 divided by 2 is 1, but it's negative 1, sorry. And then we're going to square it, and that gets us 1. So we're adding 1 to both sides, okay? Now, if you remember, what goes in the parentheses is x and squared, and that's 5. And we're going to put whatever the factor is right here. So we have x minus 1. So the factors of x minus 2x, x squared minus 2x plus 1 is x minus 1 and x minus 1, because negative 1 times negative 1 is 1, and negative 1 plus negative 1 is negative 2. From there, we square root, and we get x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Well, the square root of 5 comes out as a decimal. We don't want that. And 5, we know, is a prime number. Anytime it's a prime number under a square root, you're not going to be able to simplify. We haven't learned how to simplify those quite yet, and that's fine. But we'll get there, hopefully. And if we don't, you have Algebra 2 and geometry, so it'll be fine. This gives you 1 plus or minus the square root of 5, and luckily, we're lazy enough as mathematicians, that will be your answer, so you don't have to go any further, okay? So what I want you to do now is go ahead and do number 4 on your own, see how far you can do it, and we'll go from there, okay? So I'll go ahead and pause the video now. All right, now that you restarted the video, sorry, I'm not going to lie to you, I was literally texting my mother. Okay, so the first step you're going to do is x squared plus 16x plus blank space equals negative 36 plus blank space. Remember, we have to move this over. Okay, we're skipping steps, and the opposite of adding is subtracting. Okay, so we're going to take, and we don't have a lot of room here, I'm going to divide this up. Okay, we're going to take 16 divided by 2, always the b value, square it. 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 squared is 64. So we're adding 64 to both sides, okay? What's great is that we already know the factors of this, and it's going to be x plus 8 and the whole thing squared. And we have 64 minus 36, which is 28. Okay. You're going to square root both sides, and you get x plus 8 equals plus or minus the square root of 28. We have not learned how to simplify this yet, so we are not going to simplify. Okay, I'm not going to make this more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, so I should put do not simplify. You can, but there's no need to. Okay, you would subtract the 8 over, and you would have your answer. Okay, so if you want to stop the video here, you can. I am going to show you how you can simplify the square root of 28, and I'm going to show you kind of a weird way, but I really, really like it. It's a way I learned last year. So if you wanted to simplify, continue listening to my lovely voice. If you don't want to simplify, no big deal. Stop the video and move on to what you need to do. Okay, so everything out of a square root comes out in pairs. So this is kind of weird, like I said. we're going to do the same. We're going to divide, and we're only going to divide by prime numbers. So we know 28's, so prime numbers, we're going to talk about like 2, 3, 5, 7. Okay, so we're going to divide 28 by 2 because we know it's even. That gets us 14. We divide it by 2, and that gets us 7. 7's prime. We can't go any farther, so we're not going to divide by 7 and get 1. That's prime. We're done. Okay, that's a pair right there. And since pairs come out of square roots, okay, we really get something like this. That's what that's saying. We did prime factorization without realizing it. That's squared, so it'd cancel out and leave you with just 2. So without having to do it that way, you can just say, okay, that's a pair of 2's. That's going to come out, and I'm left with whatever can't pair up with something, which is the square root of 7. So that would be how it's simplified. So your answer actually could be this. And if we had simplified radicals, I'd say let's do it that way, but we haven't. So either answer is perfectly okay. All right. Hope that makes sense. Get a hold of me if you have any questions. All right. Best of luck.